Hi there. The 2028 Democratic presidential primaries are set to be the most exciting and interesting primaries for the Democratic Party since 2008. It may be far off, but in less than 2 years' time, Democrats across America will be announcing their run for the Oval Office, and with no eligible incumbent or clear frontrunner, it's very difficult to see who could be the nominee. Anyone could sweep the nomination. And when it comes to a good nominee, we're going to be limited. We need to find out who is best suited to take on the Republican nominee. May that be J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, or maybe even dog-killing Kristi Noem. Sorry, wrong photo. Anyways, these primaries are going to be awesome, yet very crowded, which is why, as a British person way too invested in US politics, I've decided to follow in the example of many other people on YouTube and make my own tier list of candidates based on how well I think they would do in a presidential election. I've got my 24 candidates here, as well as my 5 tiers. There's the Just Don't Run tier for the candidates with virtually no chance of winning in 2028, the Serious Risk tier for the candidates who have little chance but could cause an upset if they play the cards right, the Gambling tier for the candidates who are kind of like 50-50, maybe they'll win, maybe they won't, the Strong Potential tier for the candidates who I think have a very good chance in 2028, and the Ultimates tier. Now, here is where it gets interesting. I'm not going to put anyone in the Ultimates tier until the end of the video, where I'm going to take 3 candidates from the Strong Potential tier and put them in the Ultimates tier, and they will be the candidates that I think have the best chance of beating the Republican nominee. Now, I've categorised the candidates into 4 groups of 6. The first 6 candidates are the candidates that will almost definitely not be the nominee. The 6 candidates after that are the potential dark horses, the candidates who probably won't be the nominee, but could exceed expectations in the primaries if they play the cards right. The 6 candidates after that are what I would call the challenger candidates, the candidates who aren't front runners but are definitely well in the conversation of people who could be the nominee. And then there's the final 6, the big 6, the front runners, the ones leading the polls. And it's within this group that I think the most likely nominee is. Alright, so without any further ado, I've got my glass of Pepsi because my voice goes very dry after talking for a while. I've got my tier list. Let's get going. So we're starting off with California Congressman Khanna, who I'm going to put in the Serious Risk tier. I do like his ideas about progressive capitalism. I think the Democrats could benefit from moving more towards progressivism in 2028. I think this whole idea of trying to be as moderate as possible to try and remain electable has damaged them. It's made them look uninspiring, and I think Khanna could fix that. And he is a good speaker as well, but the fact that he's only been in the House for 8 years, and the House is not really a launching pad to the presidency, I think that will significantly harm him. He's not got that much recognition, and he comes from California, which is the current Republican scapegoat state in a way. They always talk about how bad it is there, and just about how much the Democrats have ruined it, and I think Khanna will struggle in that factor. Okay, so Josh Green, he's the current governor of Hawaii, and I'm also going to put him in the Serious Risk tier. I don't think he's a bad candidate by any means. He's progressive but pragmatic, which I love. He was a doctor before he was a politician, but I think what will harm him is his low recognition from coming from Hawaii, which is thousands of miles away from mainland USA. It gets nowhere near his media coverage, which explains his low recognition. And honestly, he wouldn't even be in this list if he had not expressed interest in running for the presidency. My next candidate's Rahm Emanuel, and I'm going to put him in the bottom tier. He just should not run. So he was the Japan ambassador under Joe Biden. Before that, he served under Obama as chief of staff and Bill Clinton as senior advisor, amongst some other roles that he had. So he's had long-term experience, but none of it's really been that prominent. He's come across, he's got a reputation of being quite angry, quite verbally aggressive, burning down more bridges than he builds. And he's quite a divisive figure as well. He's recently said that men cannot become women, so he said that trans women aren't women. And I think he will definitely struggle to unite the whole Democratic base behind him on a national level, which is why I think he would be a terrible candidate. Not as terrible, however, as former Governor of New York, Andrew Cuomo, who's going to be bottom of the list. No one will be lower than him. We all know who he is. He was governor of New York for 10 years, forced to resign over sexual harassment scandal, tried to make a political comeback this year as NYC mayor, but lost the Democratic primary to Zoran Mamdani. I'm not going to talk about him anymore. I don't really want to. We all know he'd be a terrible candidate. The next one is John Fetterman, the Pennsylvania senator, who's going right on the end of Serious Risk. And I've only spared him from the bottom tier because he does come from Pennsylvania, which I would say is the most important swing state in the country. He does have appeal amongst blue-collar workers, but I think all of that is vastly overshadowed by all of his negative attributes. First of all, he's ideologically inconsistent. He came into Senate and was labelled as a progressive, but denied that label. Then he talks about leaving progressivism despite saying he wasn't a progressive. Then he said that progressives won the election for Trump. Then he was praised by Trump for being one of Trump's favourite Democratic voices within the Senate, which I think would damage his reputation, given that Trump, I think by the end of his presidency, will be very unpopular. And yeah, I just don't think he's really got a firm ideology set in stone that will make him electable. And then furthermore, he's got kind of like the image of a bit of a deranged wrestler. He looks like he spent like 30 years too long in WWE. And he's also had health issues. He had a stroke a few years ago, which in a post-Biden and potentially post-Trump era, I don't think health issues will fly well at all with voters. Which is why I think Fetterman would just overall be a terrible candidate. All right, finally in this category is Jasmine Crockett. Now, I'm going to talk about Jasmine Crockett a bit first because I really do like Jasmine Crockett. I think she's a good progressive within the Democratic Party. She's a fighter, she's a bold communicator, and she's able to match the energy of a lot of her Republican colleagues like Marjorie Taylor Greene and Nancy Mace by saying that like things like Marjorie Taylor Greene's fake eyelashes are like real bad and stuff, which I think really is the energy that the Democrats need in 2028, and I think she could breathe new life into the party. But where I think she will struggle is she has been seen by a lot of people as uncouth. She is very similar to Donald Trump in her tone in a way, maybe not as bad, but at the end of the day, I think Donald Trump's tone would not come as well from a younger black woman, given that America is pretty racist, it's pretty sexist, and it's pretty ageist. So Donald Trump's tone would work with an old white man, but with a younger black woman, I think it could be damaging, which is very unfair, very unjust, but it's just kind of the reality. And on top of that, she's only had 2 years of experience in the House, so she's one of the most inexperienced candidates on this list, which is why, as much as I don't want to, I'm going to have to put her in the bottom tier. In the future, if she moderates her tone a little bit and gets some more experience, I think she could be a very good candidate, but right now, it's just way too soon for her. Okay, moving on to the potential dark horses, the people who could sweep the nomination out of nowhere. And we're starting off with the Senator from Georgia, Jon Ossoff. So, some things that make Jon Ossoff a very good candidate are the fact that he comes from Georgia, which is a key swing state. He's quite a youthful character and he's got a good image. He's a very effective mobiliser. He was able to rally thousands around him for a rally that he held like a month ago, despite the fact that his Senate race is not for like another year and a half. So, like Crockett, he could be the energy that the Democrats need in 2028, and he could also breathe new life into the party. But with Ossoff, he's not that well recognised, and in terms of policy, it's very hard to see where he actually stands. As Amy Klobuchar would say, he might be all firm and no beer. He needs a little bit more substance before he can consider a presidential run. And for that reason, I would put him in the gambling tier. Again, like Crockett, a very strong future candidate. Right now, maybe not the time. My next candidate is Gina Raimondo, the former Commerce Secretary. And the best way for me to describe Gina Raimondo is that she's such a safe candidate, I think it's a risk. Which is why, to no shock, I'm putting her in the serious risk tier. So she does have good executive experience on a state and cabinet level, being the Rhode Island governor and Commerce Secretary. She's a very competent person, and I think if she was the president, I think she'd be a good one. But, like I say, she's not that well recognised. She's not really that charismatic, so I think when it comes to actually debating the candidates and actually trying to inspire voters, I think she will falter in that area, which is why I've got her as a pretty weak candidate. My next candidate is quite an interesting one. It's Senator from Arizona, Ruben Gallego, and here's why he's interesting. Gallego was only just elected to the position of senator following Kirsten Sinema's announcement that she was not going to run for a second term. He beat Kari Lake in 2024 by, we'll have a look here on the Senate map, he beat her by 2.4 percentage points. When you compare that to Trump in the same year, Trump managed to win the state of Arizona by 5.5 electoral points. It was the most Republican swing state of 2024. So the fact that Ruben Gallego, who was a progressive in the House of Representatives, being a member of the Progressive Caucus, the fact that he was able to moderate his tone for Arizona, a key swing state, shows that he has a good electoral strategy. And if he was able to apply that nationwide, he could have the best strategy that the Democrats have had since Barack Obama. That's a very bold statement to make, but I stand by it. And I just think, like Ossoff, like Crockett, his only downfall is that it's coming a bit soon for him. He's only just been elected to the Senate. Yes, he was in the House for 10 years before that, but he needs more recognition before he can go for an office as big as president, which is why I'll put him ahead of Ossoff, but he is a gambling candidate. The next candidate is Connecticut Senator Chris Murphy, who again, is also a gambling candidate. I think he has some good attributes, whilst he also has some bad ones. The good attributes are that he's from the more progressive wing of the party. He's been an outspoken critic of neoliberalism, which I think a lot of Americans will be pretty sick of at this point. I think the Republican Party, they don't really seem to focus much on neoliberalism anymore since they've moved to Trumpism, whereas the Democrats have remained pretty on that third way those third way ideals. And Chris Murphy's ideas are breaking away from that, embracing left-wing populism, which he said the Democrats need to do following the failure of the Harris campaign. I think if he was able to really evoke that policy to the voters, he could have some success, but I don't think he will be able to do that on the count that he's not that recognised, and he's not really the most charismatic candidate. He's articulate, he's very well articulated during his committee work, especially when he was scrutinising Kristi Noem, but he's just not got the charisma needed to be a presidential candidate. Future Senate leader, maybe. Presidential candidate, probably not. Now, Mark Kelly is my next one. He's the other senator from Arizona, and I have a lot of good things to say about Mark Kelly, to be honest. I would call him the opposite of Chris Murphy in a way, in the sense that his policy is not that inspiring. He's one of the biggest moderates in the Senate. He opposes the Green New Deal and Medicare for All. However, he has had some positive stuff about his policy in the sense that he's been very critical of Senate Democrats and the Biden administration when it comes to border control, which is what, if you look at the key issues of 2024, immigration was quite a key issue, and that is why Trump was successful ultimately. It was a big reason as to why. And if Mark Kelly is able to win over those Trump voters who voted for Trump on immigration, he could bring a lot of voters to the Democrats. And on top of that, I think Mark Kelly's story is really inspiring. He served for, I think, about 20 years in the army. And on top of that, he was a literal astronaut who went to space 4 times. Imagine someone like that as the president. Imagine someone like that on the presidential ticket. That is such an inspiring story that I think a lot of Americans will look at, appreciate, and think, he's really inspired me. I want him to lead our country. And so for that, it's a bit cheesy. I think this will be one of my bolder predictions. Or not predictions, but statements. But I'm going to put him in the strong potential tier. I think he would be a very effective candidate. Okay, moving on to Senator Raphael Warnock from Georgia. Now, I'm just going to say it. I love Raphael Warnock. I think he's one of the most charismatic voices in the party, which comes from the fact that he's a reverend and a preacher. Let's just take a look at his opening line at the 2024 DNC.
Well, hello, America.
I mean, I don't even need to show you any more than that. How can you not want someone on like that running the country? He's so charismatic. He's so engaging. I think he'd be a very effective mobiliser, much like his Georgia comrade, Jon Ossoff. And in terms of policy, he's got a nice little moderate progressive blend. In terms of his characteristics, like I said, he's a reverend, so he's able to appeal to the religious voters. He's black, so a lot of black people do tend to be religious in America, very deeply religious as well, so you'd be able to vote for them, whilst also having the more liberal social policies that some Christians might find a little bit putting off. So I think Raphael Warnock could be one of the best coalition builders within the party, and because of that, I'm going to put him in the strong potential tier. I'm actually going to put him ahead of Mark Kelly. Okay, now we're moving on to the challenger candidates. The candidates who, like I say, I don't think are the front runners at this stage, but are definitely well within the conversation. And we're starting off with a very recognisable candidate in Tim Walz. We all know Tim Walz. He was the vice presidential candidate in 2024. He's the governor of Minnesota. And do I think he would be a strong candidate? I'm going to say there are things that could make him a strong candidate in the sense that he was a veteran, like other candidates on here, like Gallego and Kelly. And he is a very experienced candidate. He's a well-known candidate and quite likeable as well. But I don't think he would be a strong candidate, if I'm going to be honest. I think the fact that he was the running mate to the Harris campaign means that he's got a loss in his electoral history, a very major loss as well, that's going to taint his reputation. And in his debate with J.D. Vance, whilst it was quite a level debate, I think we did see he struggled a bit. He came across as very nervous. He mistakenly said that he'd become friends with school shooters, failed to correct himself there and then he described himself as a knucklehead when under pressure. I don't know about you, but I would not want a knucklehead as the commander-in-chief. So I think with all that considered, I think I have to put Tim Walz in the serious risk tier, and I would put him near the end because of his association with the Harris campaign. If there's one thing worse than nominating the loser, it's nominating the running mate. Look at Walter Mondale. Now moving on to Maryland Governor Wes Moore. So for Wes Moore, I would consider him quite a strong candidate. He is fairly inexperienced given the fact that he's only been a governor for 2 years, but I would say he's a very inspiring candidate. He comes across as someone who can really relate to voters. I saw a video of him, like, I think it was like at a barbecue or something, and he just came across as a more relatable guy, a more casual guy, not someone like Donald Trump or Gavin Newsom who's there like, I'm the governor, I'm in my suit, and I'm better than you. He seems to really engage with, like, just your casual citizens. He before becoming governor, he was the CEO of the Robin Hood Foundation, which aimed to alleviate childhood poverty in New York City. So he's quite a philanthropic candidate as well. And all of that on top of his military experience, I think could make him quite a strong candidate. All right, the next candidate is Andy Beshear, who is the governor of the Scarlet Red state of Kentucky. Now, I'm going to talk a little bit about that. So Kentucky is one of the most red states in the country. It voted for Trump by 30 points in 2024 and 26 points in 2020. However, Andy Beshear in 2019 was able to flip the state in the gubernatorial race. It was previously held in the gubernatorial office by Matt Bevin, a Republican, and Andy Beshear was able to only just flip it and then capitalised on this 4 years later and won by a 5-point lead. And he's really like stayed away from culture war issues and focused on more kitchen table issues like jobs and healthcare, which I think is what most Americans want to focus on at this point rather than the culture war issues, despite how much the Republicans want to talk about that. And I think that could make Beshear a very strong candidate. He's got great state appeal. He knows the issues that matter. And I do have a couple of negatives about him, though. One of which is that he is very moderate. And like I said earlier, I think if the Democrats position themselves as too moderate, they will come across as too uninspiring. And on top of that, he's very uncharismatic. He's definitely not got anywhere near as much charisma as the likes of Raphael, Warnock, or Jasmine, Crockett, or Kamala Harris. And I think that could harm him on a national level because when it comes to the debates, charisma is essential. And I don't think he will have that in him. So I will put him in the strong potential tier, but I'm going to put him right on the end of it. All right, the next candidate is another very recognised candidate in Amy Klobuchar, and I would put her in the gambling tier. So, like I said, she's well recognised. She ran for president in 2020 and did fairly well. She has great experience. She's been in the Senate since 2007. And she does have kind of like a folksy tone that can help her appeal to a lot of voters. She's able to crack a joke or a one-liner, which makes her quite likeable. However, personally, I don't think younger voters will find this as appealing. I don't think they'll dislike it by any means, but I don't think they'll find it as likeable as older voters, which could damage her. And also, in terms of her image, she does come across as a little bit abrasive, a little bit snappy, quite nervous as well, which was brought up on SNL.
I know some of you think I'm shaking because I'm nervous, but this is just my signature quick quivering bang. It's my spidey sense that tingles whenever we need a moderate to say, girl, we can't pay for that.
Yeah, so when SNL are bringing that up, I think, even though they make fun of anyone, I think it shows that you're kind of in trouble in that area. And it also brought up the fact that she's a moderate. She's one of the most moderate voices in the Senate, I would say. She's quite a leader in the Senate, but I think that could harm her because if you look at Democratic polling at the minute, I don't need to show the video, I don't need to put the video on, but only 21% of people approve of the Democratic Party, and even only a minority of their voters approve of them, and the disapproval ratings are like the worst in years, essentially. And because she's so emblematic of the establishment, I think that will harm her, which is why I'll put her in the gambling tier and I'll spare her from the serious risk tier because of her recognition and experience, but I don't think she will be a strong candidate at all. Okay, now we're going to talk about Gretchen Whitmer, the governor of Michigan. Now, I really like Gretchen Whitmer. She comes from Michigan, which is a key swing state. It's also on the Rust Belt, which could help her appeal to voters in Wisconsin and Pennsylvania. She's got great charisma. She had a very energetic speech at the DNC where she openly said, in Detroit, they call me Big Gretch. And I just think she's a very likeable candidate. She's got that moderate progressive blend. She's able to work across the aisle. She got a lot of attention for working with Trump, which a lot of Democrats criticised her for. But I think a lot of voters could appreciate that if she gets it through to them that she was doing it for the greater good of Michigan. And I think all of these candidates will work very well in her favour. The only negative thing that I can really say about her is that she's not exactly the most popular governor in the country, but she does rank at like 24th, which is kind of like a midpoint. So she's not a bad governor by any means, I would say. And so for all these reasons, I don't really have much negative to say about her. I think she's a very strong candidate, and I'm going to put her on the higher end of the strong potentials here. Okay, moving on to Whitmer's neighbour from Illinois, the governor, J.B. Pritzker. Now, J.B. Pritzker, I would probably put in the gambling tier. I do like the fact that he's a very progressive candidate. I like the fact that he's one of the biggest leaders in the anti-Trump resistance. He's been very outspoken against Trump. But I think if you look at Illinois and how it's voted in recent years, it's been a very blue state. I think 2024 was like the first time in a while that it's not been like very strongly blue. Yeah, the first time since 2004. And so I don't think he has much state appeal. He's not exactly the most popular governor from what I'm aware of. If we refer back to the opinion polls, he ranks 32 out of 50, which isn't the greatest if you ask me. And in terms of his image, he's a billionaire. His family's got their own Wikipedia page. I know I'm just changing between tabs now, but I think when your family has their own Wikipedia page for how wealthy they are, it kind of says a lot about your net worth and how wealthy you are. And in terms of his image as well, I hate to say it and I hate to make a point out of this, but he is visibly overweight and the Republicans have scrutinised him a lot for that. And it's very nasty and very unfair and it shouldn't reflect badly on him. But kind of like Jasmine Crockett, how I said like her turn won't be appreciated from a younger black person as it would with an older white man like Trump. It's just kind of the reality in America. Image does matter. And factors like this do unfortunately matter. And I think it will damage Pritzker. Okay, we are on to the final six. The big six. The frontrunners. The ones most likely to be the nominee in 2028. And once again, we're starting off with the most recognisable candidate, a woman who needs no introduction at all, Kamala Harris. So we know who Kamala Harris is. She was the 2024 nominee, the former vice president under Joe Biden, and she's definitely the most recognisable candidate on this list, and probably the candidate with the most valuable experience on this list, and she does have a decent bit of charisma. There are her positives. Now get ready for the negatives. So the negatives are pretty obvious. She lost the last election. She ran in 2020 and was seen as like a potential dark horse and was eliminated before the primaries, largely due to her debate performances in which she got ripped apart for her record as California Attorney General, specifically by Tulsi Gabbard. And I think renominating her would be a huge risk from the Democrats, and I mean like a very significant risk, which is why I have to put her in the serious risk tier. I'll spare her from the bottom tier on the fact that if the Trump presidency goes as bad as she says it would, she might be able to appeal to voters and say like, look, I told you it was going to go bad. I understand you didn't know me as well last time because I joined the race very late, but why don't you give me another chance? But realistically, I think it is too risky for the Democrats to even think about. Okay, the next candidate is another very recognisable candidate, Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, better known as AOC. So let's talk about AOC. She's the congresswoman from New York, from the 14th district. She's one of the most left-wing Democrats in the House and in Congress altogether. She's one of the most anti-establishment Democrats, which I think could help her in 2028. She's really engaging. That's how she was able to unseat the incumbent Joe Crowley back in 2018. And so there are a lot of things here that could make her a very strong candidate. However, she does have some very significant negative attributes. First of all, she's very inexperienced. She's only served in the House since 2019. That only gives her 6 years of experience in a chamber that is not the launching pad to the presidency in the same way that the Senate is. She's one of the most left-wing Democrats, like I said, and she identifies as a socialist, which in a Gallup poll taken at the start of 2024, which was about whether you would vote for a candidate based on certain attributes, 51% of people said that they would not vote for a socialist. So if that poll accurately reflects what most of America is thinking, that means she would get rejected by the majority of Americans. Furthermore, she would only be 39 years old if she were elected, which would make her the youngest president in US history. So she's barely constitutional. And so for all those reasons, I do love AOC, but I think she would get killed in an election, which is why I'm going to have to put her in the just don't run tier. I think she really needs to, like, if she wants to run for president, she needs to rebrand herself, abandon the socialist label, and move towards the, well, not move towards the centre of the party, but just identify as a progressive. I think that would be enough, and not come across as so far left as she already does. Okay, California Governor Gavin Newsom. Now, Gavin Newsom, right now, I would say is kind of like the de facto leader of the Democratic Party. He's definitely one of the biggest leaders in the anti-Trump resistance. He's taken to social media to mock Trump online over the redistricting battle that's currently occurring between California and Texas, and is set to have other states join the battle. He's one of the most recognisable candidates, being governor of California for 6 years. Before that, he was lieutenant governor. Before that, he was mayor of San Francisco. So he's got significant experience also. He's part of that liberal progressive blend of the party, which, like I say, I think would be very appealing to a wide range of voters. However, I do think Newsom does have some very negative attributes working against him. Like I said, he's the governor of California, a state which, as I said with Khanna, has become the Republican dumping ground, the scapegoat state. And because he's governor, he will be directly blamed for all of the problems going on there, which he kind of already is. I mean, his ex-wife, Kimberly Guilfoyle, made a speech at the 2020 RNC where she said, take a look at California, the Democrats have ruined it. And that might be a little bit biased considering she's his ex-wife, but the point still stands. Furthermore, in terms of his image, whilst he's good looking, he comes across as a bit like a villain type. He kind of looks like a Darman villain. Every time I see him, it's like he should be in the thumbnail of a video called Boss Fires His Employees. What happens next is shocking. He lives to regret it. And I just think he's clearly wanting the presidential position very badly. And I think a lot of voters might be able to see that as he's wanting it for his own means rather than for the greater good. Like, he comes across as very ambitious, which I think could help him, but could also harm him. And in the way that he is mocking Trump online, I think he could come across as a bit silly. And in a post-Trump era, I think maybe a lot of Americans could be done with that. That being said, I won't put him in the bottom two tiers. I'll put him in a nice little middle ground between Klobuchar and Ossoff and put him in the gambling tier. He's got some very good attributes, but some very bad ones. So the middle ground seems like the good place for him. Alright, so we're going to talk about New Jersey Senator Cory Booker now. So Cory Booker, like Newsom, is part of that liberal progressive blend of the Democratic Party. He's, again, one of the loudest voices in the anti-Trump resistance. He's openly scrutinised Democrats. He's criticised Democrats in Congress quite passionately, quite borderline aggressively for not resisting Trump enough, targeting people like Amy Klobuchar for just kind of like complying with the business of the Trump administration. He recently made a Senate speech that lasted 25 hours, which is the longest Senate speech in history, simply for the purpose of disrupting the Trump administration. And that energy, that fighting, I don't know the word for it, that fighting ability of him, I think is what a lot of Democrats want to see in 2028. And I think it's what a lot of voters will want to see from their president. And I think if you can bring that tone to the national stage, whilst it can come across as a bit theatrical and that could hold him back a bit if he comes across as too angry, I think that would really help him, which is why this is another bold pick of mine. I would put him so far in the top 3 of the strong candidates. I think Booker would do really well on the national level, and in the primary for that matter. Okay, so I'm really annoyed right now because I was coming to the end of the video and my phone ran out of storage, so I've gone through, I've deleted a couple of apps and I'll reinstall them afterwards, and hopefully we can make it to the end of the video this time. So I was about to discuss the governor of Pennsylvania, Josh Shapiro. Now, some good things about Josh Shapiro, things that would make him a good candidate, are that he's the governor of Pennsylvania, which, as I said earlier, is the most important swing state in the country. He's a very effective communicator, one of the best speakers within the party, one of the most leadership-like people within the party, which is why he is governor. And I think he could be someone who, when it comes to the debate stage, will be able to engage directly with Americans through the screen, through the camera, I should say, and give them a reason to get out of bed in the morning and go vote for him. And the things that I think will hold him back are the fact that he's very aggressively moderate. Like, that's how I would describe him. Aggressively moderate, aggressively centrist. And I think with his support for things like corporate tax cuts, school vouchers, and Israel in the Gaza situation will alienate a lot of progressives, meaning he will struggle to unite the party behind him. I'm not saying progressives will go and vote for Trump, but I think you really do need to keep their support if you want to show the party is united behind you. Because if your own party can't unite behind you, it kind of shows that you're not a good leader, and that's the problem that I said Rahm Emanuel would have. Despite that, I will put Josh Shapiro in the strong potential tier, but just outside of the top 3, which is lower than some people are putting him. Okay, we are on to the final candidate, Pete Buttigieg, the former Transportation Secretary. Now, Pete Buttigieg is one of the most recognisable names within the Democratic Party, and that has been shown through some very early polling, which has pulled him either behind Harris in a lot of the polls, like directly behind in second place, and has been polling him as the leader in polls that Harris has not been included in, which shows that if Harris weren't to run, he could be considered like the front runner. He got his recognition from the 2020 presidential race, in which he ran as kind of like an underdog candidate, with his only experience being as mayor of South Bend, Indiana. And he surprised a lot of people. He was definitely the dark horse of the primaries. He was seen as like that kind of compromise between the moderates and the progressives, although I would definitely describe him as a moderate. He took Medicare for All and changed it into Medicare for All who want it, so supporting the idea of a public option, but not completely shutting off private insurance and allowing Americans that freedom to choose. He's a very effective communicator, much like Josh Shapiro. If you just look at his DNC speech and his performances in the 2020 debates, you'll see what I mean. He's very charismatic and is seen as definitely a future leader of the party. So where could it go wrong for Buttigieg? Well, first off, he is quite inexperienced. I know he served as Transportation Secretary for 4 years, but being in the cabinet is not really a launching pad to the presidency unless you've had prior experience, such as Hillary Clinton when she was a senator for 8 years before becoming Secretary of State. Furthermore, being the Transportation Secretary under Joe Biden could mean that he's associated with a very unpopular administration at the minute, so that could harm his reputation. And furthermore, Pete Buttigieg is a gay man. Let's just refer back to this Gallup poll that we looked at earlier with AOC. Only 74% of people said that they would vote for a gay candidate, 23% said they would not, and that 74% is a 4% decrease from the same poll taken in January 2020, which kind of like shows how little appeal Buttigieg could have. There's a reason that he was polling at black voters with black voters at 0% in 2020. It's because black voters tend to be more religious, which means they tend to be more like skeptical of like gay people and stuff. I don't know if that's the right way to put it, but you'll see what I mean. So for those reasons, I don't think I can put Buttigieg as a strong candidate, despite the fact that he should be. It's unfair prejudices in America striking again, and that's why I've got to put him in the gambling tier. Okay, we are at the end of the video, and as I said earlier, it is at this point where I will be naming my ultimates, the top 3 candidates, the candidates who I believe have the best chance of defeating the Republican nominee in 2028, and they are Gretchen Whitmer, Raphael Warnock, and Cory Booker. So why in this order? So Cory Booker, as I said, he can get a little bit theatrical, he can come across as a little bit angry at times, so that could harm him a little bit. Raphael Warnock, I've only put him behind Whitmer because he's not that well recognised yet, so I think he will need a little bit more recognition before he can have like a serious challenge like in the primaries and on a national level. But I do think he is pretty well positioned already. Gretchen Whitmer, I don't really have much to say about her, to be honest. Like I say, her approval ratings could be a little bit better, but we shouldn't listen to them too much, I don't think. And I think she'd be a very good candidate. Unfortunately, she has said she won't run in 2028, but Clinton said that about 2016, Obama said that about 2008, and look where we are now. Anything could happen. Thank you so much for watching this video, guys. Please engage with it in any way you can. Like, comment, subscribe, even share it with people if you can. I'm really interested in American politics, and I would love to make more videos on it, so your help would be greatly appreciated, like you don't even know. Comment below if you disagree with any of my placements. Comment if there are any candidates who I did not discuss that you would like me to discuss, and I will do my best to respond to that. Apart from that, thank you so much again for watching. Goodbye from me. Goodbye from my glass of Pepsi, keeping me alive throughout the video, and I'll hopefully see you in the next one. Peace.